Hello and welcome to this special edition of a broadcast that we're bringing to you in collaboration with Voice of America. My name is Mohammed Saleh. Now, the US House Speaker Kevin McCarthy and Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen underscored cooperative ties between their governments at a meeting in California. The meeting, of course, has come amidst Chinese threats of possible retaliation, as both United States and Taiwan are facing some rising tensions with China. Now, Voice of America's Mike O'Sullivan gets you the story.
House Speaker Kevin McCarthy led more than a dozen members of Congress to the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library in California, which honors the 40th president, for a meeting with Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen. At the gathering, McCarthy promised to work with Taiwan for economic freedom, democracy, stability, and peace in Asia.
Today was a bipartisan meeting. Republicans and Democrats united together in a place that symbolizes the freedom and the commitment and the bond that's only become stronger with the president with us today.
Supporters of Taiwan had crowded inside the lobby of Tsai's hotel, and supporters of mainland China gathered outside. The visit was unofficial, described as a transit stop after the Taiwan leader's visit to Central America. China analyst Patricia Kim of the Brookings Institution says the trip is a response to increased Chinese aggression on many fronts.
Not just the military domain, but also the economic and diplomatic domains. There has been greater pressure and desire on the part of U.S. leaders to do more to counter China's aggression in the Taiwan Strait and to increase support for Taiwan.
Tsai was heartened by the meeting.
Their presence and unwavering support reassure the people of Taiwan that we are not isolated.
Chinese officials call Tsai's visit a provocative act. China criticized last year's visit to Taiwan by Nancy Pelosi, the former Democratic Speaker of the House. In apparent response, China conducted military drills off Taiwan's coast.
It seems that expectations are that Beijing's response this time around may not be as extreme as last summer, when it engaged in unprecedented live fire drills around the island after Speaker Pelosi's visit. So it remains to be seen how extreme its reaction will be this time. And I think it could depend in part on how the California meeting is portrayed in the media.
Kim says Beijing may also moderate its response because European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, French President Emmanuel Macron, and former Taiwan President Ma Ying-jeou are all now visiting China, which seeks to present itself as a moderating force. While McCarthy and other U.S. lawmakers are reassuring Taiwan that it has friends in Washington. Mike O'Sullivan, VOA News, Los Angeles.
Now, to give us more perspective in terms of what this visit, of course, means, we're being joined by Voice of America's correspondent Chris Casquejo, who's joining us live from the White House in Washington, D.C. Now, Chris, even though the U.S. lawmakers just met with Taiwan's president on Wednesday in California, there's another group of Congress members who are already in Taiwan for more meetings with President Tsai Ing-wen. Now, what's the reason for this?
Good morning from Washington, D.C., Mohammed, and good evening to you in India. Republican House Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman Michael McCaul is in Taipei for meetings with officials, including President Tsai. McCaul said, "We are confronting a generational threat from the Chinese Communist Party, and the Indo-Pacific theater is our first line of defense against their encroachment. That's why now more than ever it's critical the United States strengthen relationships with our allies and partners in the region." McCaul is traveling with a bipartisan delegation of 7 lawmakers. The delegation is also set to meet with Taiwanese business leaders and officials to discuss ways to strengthen the U.S.-Taiwan relationship. Lawmakers are expected to meet with President Tsai on Saturday. Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin, a possible candidate for the Republican nomination for president in 2024, also plans to visit Taiwan later this month.
All right, very interesting. Now, the question, of course, is this, Chris. What do both Taiwan's president and the United States House Speaker hope that their meeting will actually accomplish?
Mohammed, Wednesday's meeting was not necessarily about delivering any concrete results, according to Robert Ross, a professor of political science at Boston College who spoke with VOA. For Tsai Ing-wen, this is about simply establishing a presence in the world, establishing her presence as the leader of Taiwan, and her success in meeting with American leaders, Ross said. For the speaker, his objective is to establish his credentials as a supporter of Taiwan and as someone who opposes China. The meeting with the president of Taiwan allows him to say, "I'm standing up to China. They don't want me to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway."
All right, interesting there. And also, Chris, the fact that, there is historical significance to the American speaker, Kevin McCarthy, and the Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen meeting in California. Why was it this venue chosen for the meeting?
The two met at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library outside LA. Now, this location is seen as particularly meaningful because a key part of the U.S.-China policy, known as the Six Assurances, was issued under the Reagan administration, and it became a fundamental part of Washington's own One China policy. Under the Six Assurances, the U.S. has not agreed to set a date for ending arms sales to Taiwan, nor has the U.S. altered its position regarding sovereignty over Taiwan. The U.S. also promised to never pressure Taiwan to negotiate with China.
All right, very interesting there. Do continue to stay on with this, Chris, because I want you to weigh in on another important aspect that's been dominating the headlines in the United States of America, where the push to legally restrict children's access to social media sites in the United States is now gaining more momentum. So far, however, researchers say that there are both negative and positive aspects of minor children using these social media platforms. How much of these social media platforms should be regulated for children is the question. And Voice of America's Veronica Balderas Iglesias gets you the story.
No more social media access for those under 18 without their parents' permission. That will be the new standard in Utah when two new laws signed by Republican Governor Spencer Cox take effect in March 2024.
Our administration is very concerned about how social media is affecting our children. Youth rates of depression and other mental health issues are on the rise, and social media companies know their products are toxic.
Other governors and lawmakers in several states also want social media companies to be held accountable for what they argue are addictive features. There is no scientific evidence, however, to conclude that social media is the sole cause of mental health problems in minors, says Mitch Princeton, Chief Science Officer of the American Psychological Association.
We instead need to talk about what are the specific features built into social media platforms, and what is the specific content that kids could be exposed to on social media that may be helpful or harmful to which specific kids.
Meta, the company that owns Instagram, told VOA in a statement that besides removing content that promotes self-harm, it has tools that help teens have age-appropriate experiences. Snapchat is constantly being evaluated to make the platform safer, a spokesperson told VOA. Still, school districts in Seattle and other states have filed lawsuits blaming tech giants for a mental health crisis among students. Social media, more often than not, amplifies vulnerabilities that already exist. But it's a tool that has positive aspects too, according to digital media researcher Katie Davis.
In terms of teens' access to information and support online for the different identities that they are exploring.
Social media also creates educational opportunities, says researcher Linda Charmarman, an independent consultant for Meta. She encourages tech giants to work more closely with scientists and find effective ways to support the well-being of young social media users.
Find interesting, innovative ways to notice that somebody is struggling. They could find ways in which they could make it not as enticing.
Charmarman also believes parents and teachers should become well-versed on the benefits and challenges of social media so they can identify unwanted behaviors in children and provide adequate guidance. Veronica Balderas Iglesias, VOA News, Washington.
All right, so this, of course, is the big question, isn't it, that the Americans are, in fact, talking about right at the very top. How much of social media access should children, in fact, be given access to? And our Voice of America correspondent, Chris Casquillo, is still with us. Chris, now supporters of limiting the amount of social media use amongst young, in fact, point to the mental health aspects. It's one of the key reasons for pushing these restrictions. But there are people who, in fact, argue that access to social media is something that, young kids, at least in the age group of 15 to 16, should, in fact, be exposed to. Tell us a bit more about this debate.
Well, opponents of such restrictions have said the measures raise privacy concerns, noting that they would require any user to verify their age. Critics have also questioned whether the legislation could have unintended consequences, especially for young people already facing a mental health crisis. Ruthie Barco, the executive director for the Central U.S. for TechNet, said in a statement, "There are far better ways to solve this problem than legislating the government-mandated collection of sensitive personal information, which could unintentionally limit access to online communities that provide health and education resources and increase opportunities for fraudulent actors to seek sensitive data from consumers." Now, we should point out her group is made up of technology CEOs and senior executives. Mohammed?
Absolutely, indeed. Chris, thank you very much indeed for joining us from Washington, D.C. and getting us all that perspective there. Thank you very much.